The blocked doctor saves a life in mid-flight. The cabin lights were low and warm, a false sunset set to calm a restless flight. Outside, the last band of evening burned orange along the wing edge, then slipped to black. The plane hummed like a steady heart. Row 18 was quiet until it wasn't. A tray rattled. A glass slid. A man in 18C leaned back, eyes open but unseeing, his chest lifting shallow, then pausing in a way that made time hitch. His wife touched his shoulder and said his name once, then again, louder. "Peter?" A flight attendant pushed her cart, smile already reaching the next row. She stopped when she saw the wife stand, one hand gripping the headrest, the other at her own throat as if pulling breath for both of them. "He's not right," the wife said, voice thinned by fear. "Please." In 17A, a woman was already unbuckling. She moved with that kind of certainty that makes narrow aisles widen and chatter mute. "I'm a physician," she said, calm and clear. "Internal medicine. Let me check him." She had the tone of a person who has said the sentence before, who carries the training like a steady flame. She was Dr. Amara Holt. The flight attendant's name badge read S. Donnelly. Her smile froze, then fixed. "I need to see your medical license," Donnelly said, blocking the armrest with a palm. Her voice stayed sweet but edged. "Company policy." Amara nodded, already reaching for her wallet, already speaking without heat. "Of course. He's breathing shallow. Does he have chest pain?" The wife nodded, eyes wide. He said heavy. Then he went strange. Amara pulled her wallet free, found her laminated hospital badge, flipped to her state license card. "Amara Holt, MD, Emory. Let me check airway and pulse." Donnelly didn't look down. Her eyes scanned Amara's face, then her braids, then the letters, then back again, like the facts didn't settle unless they matched a picture in her head. "Do you have your DEA card?" Donnelly asked. "We had a thing once. Company policy." Amara kept her voice even. "I don't need to prescribe. I need to assess his ABCs and maybe call for oxygen, nitro if he's hypertensive and symptomatic, and get him supine. We're losing time." The wife's hand trembled on Peter's shoulder. "Please," she said to no one and everyone. 2 rows back, a man in a navy pullover said, "I'm a nurse." He stood halfway, hesitant, watching the dance. Donnelly's smile sharpened. "Please return to your seats," she said, and then to Amara, "I need to clear this with the purser." Amara glanced at Peter's lips, a shade that didn't belong on vacation. She crouched anyway, gentle but firm. "Sir, I'm Dr. Holt. Can you hear me?" She reached toward his wrist. Donnelly's hand shot out and caught Amara's forearm, light but stopping. "Ma'am," she said, "don't touch the passenger." A second passed, then 3. The cabin felt it the way people feel a pressure change before a storm. In row 9, a baby fussed and someone hissed, "Hush." The nurse swallowed and sat back down, shame and anger fighting in his eyes. Amara held Donnelly's gaze, calm, steady. "You called for a doctor?" she asked. "No one called yet," Donnelly said, as if saying it made it true. Her palm lifted, a gate. "Please wait while I verify." She backed away, cartwheels squeaking in a rhythm that sounded like delay. Peter's head lolled to one side. His wife made a sound that was not a word. Amara slid her license onto the open tray table with 2 fingers and spoke softly to the wife, careful to not touch yet, careful to hold the room with voice alone. "What meds is he on? Any history of heart disease? Any aspirin today?" The wife blinked, tried to answer. Cholesterol? Pressure. We hiked this morning. He said he was fine." Amara nodded once, reading pallor, effort, the way Peter's hand rested clawed on his thigh. She looked down the aisle. Donnelly was already whispering with the purser, both of them glancing back like the glance did the work of care. Somewhere in row 22, someone muttered, "Do we have to land?" The captain's voice came over the intercom with the trained calm of weather briefings. "Flight attendants, please take your seats for turbulence." The plane shivered, not from air, but from indecision. Amara held up her phone with her license photo open, her hospital directory page, her board certification screenshot, everything. "Please," she said to Donnelly when the attendant returned. "I need to examine him now." Donnelly's eyes touched the phone, then Amara's skin, then the phone again. "We'll handle it," she said. "Please sit." Amara Holt knew the choreography of not being believed better than the coding for cardiac enzymes. She grew up in a house with a piano that no one played because homework had to be perfect and the rent had to be paid. Her mother was a phlebotomist who came home with the faint smell of antiseptic and stories about veins that rolled away from needles like frightened fish. Her father worked nights stacking boxes, his palms thickened by cardboard, his laugh quick to return after long silences. They taught Amara to look people in the eye and use verbs that didn't apologize. They also taught her to carry her worth in her pocket, because sometimes her mouth wouldn't be enough. She chose medicine because the first time she shadowed at a clinic and watched a doctor turn panic into plan, she thought, "This is how to make meaning." She also noticed who the waiting room didn't forgive. Black women who asked questions. Immigrants with accents the staff didn't understand. Men who smiled to hide pain because poor men learn early that pain is expensive. She trained her voice to ride storms. She collected credentials like armor, not because she loved letters, but because rooms loved letters more than they loved her. Med school was a string of bright lights and small cuts. A classmate who asked if she was the diversity admit, an attending who praised her calm bedside manner as if surprised it came with skill, a patient who asked to see the real doctor while she palpated the abdomen that hurt. She learned to pause before the sting, then proceed anyway. Residency at a safety net hospital taught her the dirty math of a 2 a.m. hallway, one stretcher, 2 crashing patients, a nurse with tears in her voice saying, "Pick!" She learned to say yes to pressure and no to panic. She learned that calm is not lack of urgency. Calm is urgency with skill. She carried that distinction into every room, including airplanes, because medicine travels with you if you let it. She also carried the memory of an airplane 3 years before when a flight attendant had asked for a real doctor after she presented her license, because the picture in the attendant's head didn't match the person in front of her. That night she helped anyway, because another passenger said, "She's my doctor," and the room borrowed his certainty. She went home angry and wrote a calm letter to the airline. They replied with a coupon. She didn't use it. She kept it in a drawer labeled proof. On this flight, she had been reading a paper about high-altitude physiology when Peter's breathing changed the temperature of the cabin. She had slept 4 hours the night before after a shift that bled into morning, and still her hands were steady. Still her voice kept the meter she trusted. She had learned long ago that when bias walks into a crisis, it tries to make the crisis about itself. She refused to let that happen. She also knew the way power works in metal tubes at 36,000 feet. Titles compress, badges expand, and one person with a cart can tilt the plane's ethics. She wore an old hoodie and jeans because she had packed light for a weekend with her sister. She knew what that looked like to someone looking for reasons to say no. She laid out her license anyway, tidy and complete. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shrink her body. She held the center she had earned. The flight attendant, S. Donnelly, had her own history and habits. She was good at service manuals and quick at remembering faces of frequent flyers. She was also good at defaulting to the kind of proof the world once taught her to trust. Certain accents, certain suits, certain rings. Company guidance said, verify medical credentials before handing over the kit. Older crews turned that into a test some passengers could never pass. Donnelly had read 2 memos about bias in the last year and filed them in the part of her brain labeled HR. The part labeled Keep Control was louder. The purser, Pam, was kind and tired and had learned to diffuse with compromise. Compromise is useful when the conflict is over a seat. It is deadly when the conflict is over a pulse. Peter in 18C was a project manager with a cholesterol pill in his toiletry bag and a son who texted him scores from weekend games. He had walked too fast that morning because he was excited for the view, and later he told his wife the air felt thin in a way that made him think of birthdays. He was 57 and didn't like to make a fuss. He would have hated the scene his body was about to star in. His wife, Carol, had spent 27 years turning worry into lists. Her hands had changed diapers and checked homework and held her mother's hand when the last breaths came. She recognized the sound her husband made now, the wet, shallow tug. and she knew it meant a clock had started. She was the kind of person who apologized to waiters for other people's rudeness. She did not apologize tonight. She said please like a command. In row 17, a teenage girl with braids watched Amara and felt her own throat tighten. Not with fear of flying, but with recognition. The look on Amara's face when someone decides you are a problem to be managed instead of a help to be trusted. The girl gripped her armrest and memorized the scene without wanting to. She would tell it later because stories fix what policies miss. Donnelly came back with the purser at her shoulder and the emergency kit still sealed in Pam's hands. The kit might as well have been a locked door with the key inches away. "We'll take it from here," Donnelly said, already kneeling on the wrong side of the armrest, 2 rows of training and 1 row of pride between her and wisdom. Amara kept the lane open. "I need to assess him," she said. Pam hesitated. "We have to verify," she offered, gentle. "We can't just—" "You can," Amara said, not unkind. "The policy allows visual proof. You have it. The FAA encourages acceptance of qualified medical help. The Good Samaritan law covers me. Time is muscle." The nurse in row 20 lifted his hand again. "I can assist," he said. Donnelly snapped. "Please sit down." She leaned toward Peter with a pad and a pen as if paperwork could anchor a dropping oxygen saturation. "Sir, do you consent to us assisting you?" she asked. Peter made a sound like air squeezed from a bellows. His wife said, "He consents to the doctor helping him." That should have ended it. It didn't. A small tremor ran through the cabin, not from weather, but from watchfulness turning into judgment. Someone said, "Why is she arguing?" Someone else said, "Because they always think they know better." It was the kind of thing people say when they are tired of delays and ready to outsource blame to the most visible point. Donnelly looked at the license again as if a secret watermark would appear if she stared hard enough. She had once handed the kit to a man in a blazer with a loud voice who turned out to be a chiropractor. He had nearly given a syncopal passenger water while she was aspirating. Donnelly carried that mistake like a talisman, and now she used it to cover another mistake, thinking the absence of a blazer meant the absence of a doctor. Amara moved, not past Donnelly's gate hand, into the gap of decision. "Pam," she said to the purser because titles matter mid-air. "Open the kit. Bring the portable O2. I need the pulse oximeter and blood pressure cuff and aspirin from the emergency drawer. Call the cockpit and request they consider diversion. Tell them probable ACS versus PE. I'll confirm in 60 seconds. Pam looked at her. Something like trust moved behind her eyes, then faltered as Donnelly said, "We can't hand out meds." "You can hand me the equipment," Amara said. Calm, precise. She looked at Carol. "May I examine him?" Carol nodded so hard the row shook. "Please." Consent, clear and urgent. Amara reached for Peter's wrist again. Donnelly's hand rose a second time and stopped just shy of contact. "Ma'am," she said, warning on her tongue, "do not touch the passenger." Carol made a sound like anger breaking its shell. "Let her," she said, the edges of her voice sharp now. "Let her." Pam's grip tightened on the kit handle. Her training was a braid: customer service, compliance, safety. A memo from last quarter about bias tugged on one thread. A memory of a crew council meeting where a black flight attendant had cried about not being believed tugged on another. Pam made a decision. "Open the kit," she told herself aloud, to override doubt with action. She flicked the seals, handed Amara the pulse oximeter, reached for the O2. Donnelly froze at the sound of plastic clacking. Then her face set. "You're making a mistake," she told Pam. She turned and keyed the interphone. "Captain, we have a disruptive passenger interfering with crew duties in 18. Statements like that stick. They become the official history if no one writes a better one. The captain's reply was level. "Nature of the disruption?" "She's claiming to be a doctor and arguing over procedure," Donnelly said, and as she said it, Amara was already clipping the pulse ox to Peter's finger. 88%. Too low for sea level, lower for comfort. Amara loosened his collar, elevated his legs, palpated radial pulse, counted beats, felt the thread of it. "Pulse 120, thready," she said. She looked at his face. "Chest pain?" Peter blinked once, and the corner of his mouth moved. Yes, Carol said for him, voice thick. Left side. Radiation? Amara asked. Carol's hand flew to Peter's jaw. Here. Nausea? A little? Sweat? Yes. Decision. O2 now, Amara said. Pam moved. Donnelly stepped between, caught the tubing, and said, You can't administer, like the words were oxygen for the wrong lungs. Amara didn't flinch. I can, she said. You asked for a doctor. I'm here. She looked at Pam. You will be covered. Document my name. We are wasting myocardium. The nurse stood again, voice raised now. I'll witness. I'll assist. He looked at Donnelly with something like pity. Let her do her job. Passengers stared openly now. The teenage girl in row 17 had tears in her eyes and hate in her throat for the way this looked. She would later tell her mother on the phone, The doctor looked like me, Mom. They treated her like she was trouble. The captain keyed again. Status? Pam spoke this time. Possible cardiac event. Physician on board is initiating oxygen and assessment. We may need a diversion. The captain's tone changed by a degree everyone felt. Copy, keep me posted. We're over St. Louis airspace. Nearest suitable is STL. I'll advise ATC to stand by. Donnelly stared at Pam like loyalty had split. You're empowering her? She asked, disbelief carving the sentence. Pam met her gaze. I'm following policy, she said, and in the saying, chose a path that made her hands steadier. Amara placed the cannula, opened the flow, watched the numbers climb to 92, then 94. She took a blood pressure, 180/100. She asked about allergies, meds, ED visits. She did not waste a syllable on the argument because patients die inside arguments. She asked for aspirin and held out her palm. Donnelly didn't move. The nurse spoke quietly to Carol. He can chew it if no allergy, he said. I'll get water. Pam reached into the kit and placed the aspirin in Amara's hand. Donnelly took in a breath that sounded like complaint loading. I'm reporting this, she said. Amara nodded without looking up. So am I, she said. The captain came down the aisle, a rare move, a signal that this wasn't routine. He crouched low, bracing a hand on the seat back, checked the monitor on the emergency kit, read the numbers, listened to the patient, and listened harder to the room. He looked at Amara's license on the tray table, then at Amara, then at Donnelly. He didn't know their histories. He knew what a cabin looked like when authority had turned on itself. Doctor, he said to Amara. He chose the word on purpose. What's your call? Amara gave him clean lines. 57. Crushing chest pain, diaphoresis, tachycardia, hypertensive. Hypoxia improved on 2 liters O2. Differential includes acute coronary syndrome versus PE. Given the presentation and risk, I recommend diversion to nearest suitable. Start AED ready check. He's responsive, but I don't want to be 30 minutes from concrete if he decompensates. The captain nodded. He lifted the interphone. ATC, this is Flight 284 requesting priority landing at STL for medical emergency. We have a physician on board. Prepare EMS cardiology response. He hung up and met Donnelly's eyes. We're diverting, he said. Secure the cabin. Donnelly's jaw tightened. Captain, she said, she interfered with... He held up a hand. Secure the cabin, he repeated, not unkind. And then softer, we'll talk after. The plane banked. People felt the shift in their stomachs and their stories. The murmur rose and broke. Somewhere someone clapped once like a reflex. Amara adjusted the O2, coached Peter through slow breaths, explained what a diversion meant in simple words. We're going to land early, she said. A team will meet you. You did the right thing telling your wife. Carol nodded, tears sliding without drama. Thank you, she whispered, and the thank you landed like a weight lifted from a life. Donnelly strapped in for final, hands moving by muscle memory, eyes forward, shame and stubbornness braided tight. Pam buckled into her jump seat and exhaled the breath she had held through the argument. She had come close to failing the simple test. Almost as where harm lives, that line would ring in her head for weeks. The wheels kissed the runway hard and honest. The doors opened to the cold rush of a jet bridge and the focused movements of EMTs who roll their gear like a promise. Steamy alert. the lead medic called as he saw the BP cuff and the O2 and the face of a man who had just jumped a timeline. "Doc, report?" he asked Amara without hesitation. She handed off data like baton, vitals, meds, timeline, interventions, differential, response. He nodded. "Good save," he said. "Let's move." They did, with the dignity that comes when a room stops arguing about whether help is real and starts helping. Peter disappeared into the tunnel of bright lights and precise hands. Carol touched Amara's arm once, permission now a gift, not a request, and said again, "Thank you." Amara smiled, tired and full. "Text me if you can," she said, handing over a card. "I want to know he's okay." The cabin breathed out. The captain made the announcement with a voice that told the truth and held the passengers like a net. "We diverted due to a medical emergency. Thank you for your patience. We'll reboard after refuel and a crew check. If you were inconvenienced, we ask that you remember a man will meet his family tonight because of the time we took." Most people murmured something like agreement. A few huffed. A few always huff. Donnelly stood in the galley while the plane emptied and refilled its silence. The captain asked her to step into the front service area. Pam joined, leaning on the counter with both hands like it could steady her. The captain was direct. "We're filing a report," he said. "I need to hear your account." Donnelly delivered hers clean, the way she had rehearsed it. Concern for safety, need for verification, disruptive passenger. The captain listened, then said, "The disruptive passenger was saving a life." He turned to Pam. "Purser?" Pam didn't flinch away from the mirror. "We delayed access to care," she said. "That can't happen again," the captain nodded. "Company policy allows acceptance of visible credentials. We cannot demand impossible proof at 30,000 feet, and we cannot let bias steer the kit." He keyed his tablet and filed the safety and culture incident report with operations and in-flight leadership, tagging it urgent. He wrote the sentence that would echo through 100 crew rooms by morning, "We nearly let prejudice become procedure." The airline moved faster than rumor that night. Ops pinged in-flight. In-flight pinged legal and safety. The COO, who had read too many stories like this in headlines with other logos, wrote a note at 2:10 a.m. "We own this." By sunrise, crew inboxes carried a bulletin titled, "Medical Verification and Bias Guardrail, Immediate." It was simple. Visible credentials, license, hospital ID, digital board certification are sufficient. If in doubt, accept help and document. Good Samaritan protections apply. Discriminatory challenges to a provider's legitimacy will be treated as a safety risk. A training clip went live within 48 hours. It wasn't glossy. It didn't end with a group hug. It showed a black woman doctor presenting ID while a crew member stalled. It froze the frame and asked, "What story are you telling yourself?" It showed the correct decision tree. It showed the wrong one. It used the word bias without euphemisms. Donnelly was removed from the line pending review. In the hearing room a week later, she sat small in a chair that had held bigger mistakes and tried to explain her fear of doing it wrong. The manager across from her said, "You did it wrong," and the sentence was not cruel. It was surgical. "You delayed care without cause. You labeled the physician disruptive. You escalated control instead of urgency. If Dr. Holt hadn't persisted, we could be having this meeting with a coroner's report attached." Donnelly's eyes filled. "I thought I was following policy," she said. The manager slid the policy across the table. "You were following a picture in your head," she said. It didn't match the words on the page. The airline terminated Donnelly for cause: failure to follow life safety procedures and conduct inconsistent with anti-discrimination standards. It wasn't gleeful. It was necessary. Pam received a formal warning and mandatory training. Amara later wrote a letter on her behalf, noting the moment Pam chose correctly and how she'd guided the landing with competence once the decision was made. Accountability is not about heads. It's about hinges. Meanwhile, Carol texted Amara from a hospital room that smelled like bleach and relief. "LAD blockage," the message said. "Stent placed. He's stable. Doctor says minutes mattered. Thank you." Amara sat in her kitchen with the message lighting her hand and let herself cry for 9 seconds. one for each minute she estimates Bias stole before oxygen reached Peter's nose. Then she washed her face, drove to the clinic, and saw patients who brought her their brittle hopes and their strong hearts. The airline published a public statement short and sharp. On Flight 284, our crew delayed acceptance of qualified medical assistance. We diverted and the passenger received care. We have updated training and verification protocols and taken personnel action. We are grateful to Dr. Holt. We regret the delay in recognizing her. Some called it too little. Some called it rare honesty. Amara didn't call it anything. She printed it and put it in the same drawer as the coupon from 3 years ago, a private ledger of harm and repair. The story traveled, not as outrage alone, but as instruction. Crew members shared it in closed groups with comments like, "We won't be that flight," and "Check your picture." "Follow the tree." A nurse wrote in a forum, "Believe the docs who don't look like your TV doctor." A med student taped a screenshot of the airline's new slide above her desk and wrote, "Time is muscle," in thick marker. The teenage girl from row 17 posted a note that said, "I saw a black woman doctor save a life on my flight after being told to sit down. I'm applying to pre-med." The captain sent Amara a thank you through the company. She replied with a single line, "Thank you for choosing urgency." Months later, Amara boarded another flight. The attendant at the door greeted her with the same warmth she gave every passenger. Midway to cruising altitude, a call light chimed 3 rows back. A crew member's voice carried, "Is there a medical professional on board?" Amara stood. The attendant turned, saw her license without being asked, and said, "Dr. Wright?" It wasn't a test. It was a recognition. The kit arrived unsealed. The O2 hissed alive. The room held urgency like a shared load. The patient that day had a simple faint, nothing dramatic. Amara still checked, still cared, still smiled when the color returned. After landing, the attendant handed her a card with a handwritten note. "Thank you. We trained on your story. We're different now." Different is a humble word. It doesn't promise perfection. It promises direction. Amara tucked the card into her bag next to her license and the pen she trusted. She texted Carol an emoji heart and a question mark. Carol replied with a photo. Peter in a park, arm around their son, a scar on his wrist where the line had gone in, a grin that looked like second chances. Amara smiled at the picture and allowed herself to believe that one argument had bought 1,000 quiet minutes for strangers she would never meet. When seconds matter, do your policies protect people or your picture of who belongs? If you were on Flight 284, would you have spoken up when help was slowed? Share this to remind crews and companies. Time is muscle, dignity is non-negotiable, and bias can't ride shotgun on safety.